so excited to dive in today. I have a very special guest, Darcey Elizabeth. She's going to be really diving into this beautiful life that she has created. And we're really going to be going deep into what it took from her to get to where she's at now. Because as you guys know, we aren't just born into these incredible lives where we're living our dream and our purpose. We kind of have those moments that bring us to our knees that allow us to create our purpose and to start really consciously creating our lives. So I'm so excited to dig in with Darcey today. She is the founder of Claim Your Network Agency. She's a speaker, a podcaster, a visibility coach, an event host, and a Reiki master, which as a Reiki master, I was like, ding, ding, ding. Did we become best friends? So I'm so excited because she's really tapped into energy and she really does support you in being seen. So she is on this mission to help women get visible and to really step into their power. And so she's a proud mama of a 4-year-old boy, incredible. And she's in this beautiful, happy relationship. She loves Starbucks and coconut oil. And she is so excited to help you create and claim your worth in both life and in business. So Darcey, thank you so much for being here. I cannot wait to dive in.
Yes, Christina, I am so excited to be here. And thank you so much for bringing me on.
Yeah, of course. So let's dive in. Let's travel back in time a little bit and let's just come out swinging. So was there a moment in time, knowing that you teach women about how to really step into their worth and how to really feel seen? Was there a moment in time where you felt unworthy, unseen? Take us back to that time. And I'd love to start to reverse engineer how you got to where you're at today.
Yeah, I love this question. Now, on this side, it looks like it was, not that far away, right? Where there was growing up, I always was at this point where I was like, man, I knew I was meant for more, but I always didn't think I was capable of it, right? And I was told, from my upbringing, like, you have to just do the certain path. And that's what I really did is I did everything that society told us to do, right? I strived for the good grades. I played the sports. I dated the jock, right? So I did all these things. And then I found myself really at this like point in my early 20s where I was like, this ain't it. I checked all the boxes and I never felt more alone,
Mm.
never felt more unworthy, and also like didn't feel like myself, right? Didn't feel like I was showing up as the woman I knew I was supposed to be. So I would say my early 20s is when it really started to transition. But before that, it was something I always struggled with.
Mm. Mm. Our journeys are very similar. I feel like I checked a lot of boxes, and the further I got on my journey, the more alone and unworthy and sad I felt.
Yeah.
So I'm so grateful you're breathing this into the space because I feel like a lot of us are trying to stick within these boxes. We're trying to fit in versus really starting to connect with, I belong here. Like there's a difference between belonging and fitting in. And it feels like for most of my life and kind of what you were saying, we were trying to fit in versus actually finding that belonging within ourselves, within every room that we walk into. I belong here as myself. And so, how did you get to where you are today? Like, if we could reverse engineer that a little bit of now really knowing your worth, actually like teaching people how to become visible because you yourself embody that. Was there like a process that you walked yourself through or certain things that you did to get to now this other side where you can actually teach it because you're the embodiment of it?
Yeah. So I really started with mindset, right? Because when I started this journey, I was going through a divorce and I was a young 22-year-old going through a divorce and I felt like I had no worth. I honestly didn't even know who I was. And as I said, I felt super alone. So what I did is I started to work out. I started to move my body. And as I was working out, I would listen to podcasts. I would start reading books, right? I had all this time that used to be filled with my husband that I was like, okay, what am I going to do? Because I also didn't want to fall down the path of going out drinking all the time, too. I lost my mom to cirrhosis of the liver. So I'm very cautious of making sure I don't repeat that. And instead of drowning my sorrows, because I definitely wanted to, right? When you're at this point where you're like, oh, I just don't know what to do. I'm giving up, that sort of point. I really got into personal development. So looking back now, what I really had to do is I had to get that personal development piece so I could figure out who the heck I was, right?
Yes.
Everyone's always like, oh, you know who you are at a young age. But for me, that was my 20s. My 20s really was like showing me like, who am I? Who do I want to be? And it took a long time for me to figure that out because for so long I was trying to fit in this box. I was trying to fit into the box of what I was supposed to be. And then I go to get a divorce, and that was like totally not acceptable with my family. And I had to really reinvent who I want to be. And I think I had to also, as we talked about before, I had to stop defending myself. For
Mm.
so long, I wasted so much energy trying to make people like me, trying to defend why I was getting a divorce, why I, wanted to leave my corporate job, whatever it was. Like, this happens throughout different points in my life and everybody, right? Where we make these changes because we know our intuition's like, yes, you're supposed to do this. You feel it in your whole body, but people on the outside might not understand. So a big pivot for me was when I just started to be like, I don't have to defend myself. You don't have to explain yourself to every single person, because that is going to be such an energy suck. And then you start to really take it personally. And one thing is that when I did release that, I stopped worrying so much what people thought. And then I was
Mm.
able to tune in to who I want to be. So going back to your question, personal development was huge. I had to really figure out who I was. I had to stop defending myself. And, some people might disagree with that, but that opened up so much room and energy for me to be exactly who I want to be. And then I started to just be me and noticing that the right people would come on in, right? You start to attract the right people. And I think it's so important that we know that during this phase where you're like figuring out who you are and showing up as you might lose people on the journey, right? But I will tell you, when you start to show up as you and you just acting like yourself and not have to wear a mask and completely be the person you're designed to be, you get the right people around you. And you're going to have one of those moments. Like, I even had this yesterday where I was like, this feels good, right? I feel safe in my own body and not feeling like almost an imposter to try to be somebody that everybody wants me to be that I knew I wasn't. So I would say like personal development, I had to really get that clear. I had to let go of the judgment, and then I had to be me and let the right people come into my life.
Okay, you guys, like, if you're taking notes, please take notes on that, because that is like the most beautiful way to reverse engineer how she's gotten to where she's at now. And my journey was very similar, where you truly have to get to know yourself to understand how to honor yourself. And so she was doing that through plugging into podcasts and maybe learning exercises to get to know herself, and really taking time and space, because that's what's required. Like, take a little bit of space to get to know yourself and start following what feels really good. And then what's out of alignment will start to fall away. So that could be a job, people, circumstances, these things like partnerships start to fall away when we start to really honor who we are, because the universe is creating space for something that's more in alignment with who you are at your core. So the universe responds exactly as Darcey was just saying to what we say yes and no to, right? Like, if we're saying yes to a partner that's not aligned for us, then we're going to receive more people that are like that partner, right? So then we end up with friends that might not be aligned with us. And so it's this idea of, now that she really created that space, and she was like, that's not for me, and now I actually do know what's for me, I'm going after those things. The universe knew exactly what to start serving up to her. So she had this day yesterday where she was like, oh my God, I'm getting body chills for you. I'm living in alignment with me. And all of these beautiful things have been magnetized towards me, because that's one of the highest vibrations, is just being authentically yourself. But it does take time to get to know yourself. So I would say that's like a beautiful first step, is just like, take a little bit of time to self-reflect on what you love and what you don't love, and start to make some shifts in your life that actually are in alignment with what you do want versus what you don't.
Yeah, totally agree.
Wow, incredible. So what I also really want to highlight is what she was just saying, which was, she made decisions for herself even when other people didn't necessarily agree with them. So what did that take from you to start to really honor your decisions, even when other people were like, no, don't do that? Was it just you being like, I'm just going to test and learn and see what happens? Or were you just like, even if you don't get it, I have to honor myself. I've learned that. What did it take for you to actually do that?
Yeah, so this biggest pivotal moment is when I decided to move away from my hometown down 4 hours south from where I was. And I had a 2 year old, right? He
Mm.
was 2 years old at the time. And everybody was like, you can't move. Your baby's father's here, right? Your baby's father's here. You can't move. And I knew in me that I had to go, that for
Mm.
me to be able to show up as a mom, to give him opportunity, for us to have the support we needed, I had to move closer to my family. And they were the ones that were 4 hours south. And at first, this experience happened, and I instantly went to like defending myself, right? I remember one time my girlfriend called me and she was just like, you can't do that. And I am like full blown Capricorn over here, where I'm
Yeah.
like, oh, yes, I can. Right. So I
Yeah.
was like in this full mode where I was just like angry and telling people, I can't do this. Like, you're allowed to do this. Right. Like, I already knew like legally and everything I could do this. And I got to this point where I looked in the mirror and I'm like, this isn't you. This isn't you, where you're getting angry with people because they're never going to understand you. Like, that's how it is. When you have that full body feeling that you need to do something, if you don't follow it, the only person it's going to hurt is you, right? It's not going to hurt the people around you who don't want you to do that. But I had to really get grounded. And this is when I started to step into my Reiki Master program and be like, okay, I know I need to do this. I've got the, full body chills, the vision. I know there's something great on the other side. And I had to allow them the space to have their concern and say, I hear you, but I'm going to do this. And
Mm.
I have the permission to do that, right? Like, I have that right. And when I started to lay down that groundwork, it was hard, right? It was hard to stick up for yourself, especially coming from a place where I wasn't used to doing that, right? I always kind of had people tell me what to do. And I really got into this point where I was like, all that energy that you're wasting on defending yourself, why don't we put that energy to showing them how great this is going to be? Right. And, here we are 2 years later, and everything in my life has changed. From my business, I was able to leave my high paying corporate job, replace that with my business, and make even more money than I ever dreamed of. Right. Something that didn't even feel possible. Now I'm also able to be the mom I want to be. This morning I got to make my son the full course breakfast and bring him to school, and, meet him at lunch for parents come on in. Like, that's such a blessing. And that's something I so wanted for my life. But all these shifts happen when I started to move. I met the love of my life, my man who I'm with. And I think every day, like yesterday, where I was having that moment, I was like, if I didn't do this, if I didn't follow my gut, who would have been hurt?
Mm.
Not just me, but my son too, right? Like, I wouldn't be able to show up and be the mom I want to be. So really, it came to this point where it's like, you have to trust yourself. Because if you don't trust yourself, a lot of those moments that are meant for you, you're going to miss out. And then you're going to do the whole look back and say, but what if I did listen to myself? Right? We've all been there. There's a reason I decided to actually follow the guts, is because before I didn't. And I saw what happened. And I always say too, like, if you don't follow that intuition, a lot of times other things come into play that aren't suited for you. And that's also not a great place to be. I knew for myself that if I would have stayed, I would have became even more depressed, more
Mhm.
alone, not have the support, and I would not be where I am right now. And that's such a great moment to realize, like, hey, I do know all the answers, right? We're
Mm.
always looking for answers out in the society, your parents, whatever it may be, but you hold all the answers. And that was honestly the biggest gift I could give myself. And now to other women, to say, you do have the answers and your voice does matter. So, let's amplify it. Let's claim it.
Yes. Yes. And so what I think is so powerful about what you were saying too is this idea of like you don't have to give an excuse for why you're honoring your gut. Like, I think to like so much of what you were just mentioning, and I too experienced this for a really long time, I would come up with excuses, and it was like, oh, I can't do that because, and it's like, what if we just said, hey, I'm unavailable. Have a great time. Like, what if we just took all the pressure off of having to invent a reason why we had to follow our gut and just started doing it anyways? Because they're learning a lesson too, which is they can't control people outside of themselves. And we're simultaneously saying, I get to control, or I get to honor my truth even when other people don't get it. So both people are learning lessons on both sides in a really beautiful way. And now look at where that's brought you. And what is so powerful about what you said is like, I'm writing my autobiography in real time. And I don't want to look back and read this chapter and say, wow, I just totally gave up because someone said they didn't agree with me.
Yeah. And have you ever noticed when we do give excuses, let's even take it like if your girlfriends want you to go out and you make an excuse. When you make an excuse, it opens up the door. It's literally sending an invite for a further conversation on it that you know
Yeah.
you don't want to have. And that's
Yes.
honestly going to end up in like probably an argument. So I
Right.
love how you said, like, just shut it down. I'm not
Yeah.
available. You don't even have to give the reasons why. But when we start to do excuses, not only is that opening up for an argument to happen, but we're also kind of lying to ourselves.
Totally. Or lying to the other person. And then we're like deeper and deeper. And then we're like, shit, what did I tell her I was doing? I just remember being like, oh my God, like this is exhausting trying to remember the excuses that I made that aren't even true. Like, what if I was just honest and said, I love you and I'm just like, I'd rather sleep. I'm tired. Or I'm not even having to say that, like, have the best time. I'm not going to be able to join tonight.
Right.
Like that's it. We can take all the pressure off of having to have a reason why we need to honor our truth or why we want to.
Yeah. And let's face it, especially like being somebody who's on social media, if I tell somebody I'm like making an excuse not to go somewhere or do something, I
Right.
gotta watch what I'm posting on social. And that becomes a whole job. You know?
Yes, where it's like shit. Like I remember those days where I was like, "Oh God, now I can't post anything and I have to live under a rock." Like, why am I doing this to myself? Yeah, it was exhausting. So instead of again trying to fit in or to, just be authentically yourself, honor your truth, which is like for me, I love mornings and I want to be in bed by 8:30. Like that is my truth. And so going out at night is not a thing for me anymore. It's like it's just not my cup of tea. And so for me, I just honor that. I'm like, you want to go to brunch? I'll meet you there, but if you want to have dinner, no. Like I love you and my answer is no. And it's fine because that's my truth and now people know that. And then I've got my brunch friends if I desire to go to brunch.
And they also want to be in bed by 8:30.
I know. Now I'm attracting the people that simultaneously also want to go to bed at 8:30. I'm like, yes, I found my people.
Yes, I love it.
Yeah. So tell me, so did you feel like the universe was talking to you in certain ways as well? You said your gut was talking to you. Were there certain ways as well where you felt like the universe was sending you signs that you started being like, ooh, I'm like starting to notice energy around or 111 on my phone or things like that? Like, was the universe talking to you in certain ways, or did you find it was more of like the gut or the intuition?
Yeah, so universe was definitely talking. I'm somebody who's big on energy. So I would go down to Rhode Island. That's where I ended up moving when I left Northern Vermont. And I would go down there and I could feel like a whole body change, right? It felt safe, it felt comfortable, the waves, the beaches, everything like felt really good. And then I would leave there and I would head on back, right? Because I had to get back on mom duty, head on back. And I would get this like instant feeling of like, this doesn't feel good. So that was my first moment where I was like, okay, so energy wise, I knew it was like time for me to move there. That's more my energy. But then I started seeing Rhode Island license plates everywhere, which is
Mm.
not common up in Northern Vermont. And then it was one of those things too. My number is 8. So it'd be like, I would look, for instance, the place I ended up moving in was like 8 Northfield or something like that. Like the house number was 8. And
Wow.
it was just like all these little things that kept falling in a line. And even to the point that I listed my house and it sold for cash in 40 hours. Okay. Cash, 30,000 more than the asking price.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it was in 40 hours. And I was like, I didn't even have to do anything because it was cash,
Yeah.
right? We didn't even do like appraisal or nothing. So it was just everything kind of fell in line the moment that I decided to follow my gut. And you do get signs. And as a Reiki master, I always say, like, ask. If you're not sure about doing something, ask the universe, right? They're not going to like whisper in your ear. Maybe they will. But for me, a lot of signs come up, right? You're going to get more of that reassurance. Your dreams. I'm somebody who's really big on paying attention, like what you're dreaming about.
Yes.
And, for me, I was doing a lot of meditation, healing, and I would go back to be on the beach in Rhode Island, right? I can see
Mm.
certain things that like now are like real life that are like really happening. And, so many times we just think that it is our gut. But if you start to really pay attention, you're going to notice the universe is also working in your favor.
Mm. Those are so powerful. So be on the lookout for those signs, and they matter. They really do mean something when you see them, and make it a two-way conversation. Exactly as Darcey was just saying, that idea of like, thank the universe when you see those signs. You're going to start to get more, or really do something about the signs. Like if you're like, okay, wait a minute, I was just asking for a sign and I just immediately received it. I'm pretty sure the universe is telling me to move forward. Maybe you actually start to take some steps to move forward in that direction, because it's not fun to have a one-way conversation. And it's really important to actually not only receive the message, but to do something about it if it feels soul aligned, right? Like
Yeah.
check with your body, see if it's yours. And if it is, you're meant to honor it. Like you're getting the validation from the universe that it might not make sense completely at the time, but you're getting the validation to take that leap or to take some steps to get you closer to what your heart is pulling you towards, even if on paper it doesn't make total sense.
Yeah. And like one thing I always point out when it comes to that leap, you can always go back.
Yes.
And, one thing I did say when, I had a lot of people coming at me like I couldn't move, I've just said, the good news is y'all will still be here, right?
Yes.
Girl can come back. And
Yeah.
that's one thing that I always say, like, take the leap if you're feeling guided to it, and know that plan B is still there, right? Plan
Mm.
B is still there. And this is same with like trying out your business. So many women who are starting their business are like, well, I don't know. And I'm like, but what if you try it and then figure out if it's going to work for you or not?
Yes. Yes. So this is a beautiful segue into like, were there ever any moments in time that maybe you felt like were quote unquote failures, but really it became like the greatest lessons you've ever received?
Yeah. 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 So, well, I will say when this brings me back to younger version of me, but when I got divorced, that was a huge failure in my eyes. Now,
Mm.
looking back, I have a different outlook on it. But at the time, I felt like such a failure, right? I felt like he actually cheated. So I felt like I didn't hold my part, right? I had a lot of self-confident issues. And I struggled with that for a long time of thinking it was just my fault.
Mm.
So that was a big failure, especially in my family. That was like not acceptable, right? Everyone's all still married over here. So that was one thing I had to navigate. And then, two, later on, I end up having my son with somebody else, and we don't work out. So
Mm.
for me, failure has been on the point of relationships.
Mm.
And, you know, it took a long time for me to realize everything does happen for a reason, right? Why didn't those relationships work out? Because now I knew after having two failed relationships that I need to spend time for myself. And I had to take 2 years of no dating. And that's actually a lot harder than it sounds. Just so everybody knows, like that's a lot harder than it sounds, but 2 years of pouring into myself. So now I'm able to be the mama, the business owner, the girlfriend,
Mm.
right? The stepmom, whatever it may be, I'm able to be her. And man, I'm so glad those relationships didn't work out, because now look where I am. So yeah, there's been many times and bumps where I thought life was over, right? We've all been there where it's like, okay, well, that's it. But now knowing that all those situations have led me to where I am today.
Oh, absolutely. It's that idea of like, relationships being a really big portal for growth for you and for all of us, right? It's like our relationships are mirrors for what we're meant to heal the most within us. And so it's like really shifting, like in the time, let's say right now you're experiencing as you're listening something that you would consider a failure. I want you to know this is actually your greatest learning portal right now. Like here from the other side right now, Darcey's saying like she has her son now because of these quote unquote moments that didn't feel like, oh, shoot, I did something wrong. It's like, absolutely not. Full body chills for her because that's one of the most incredible parts of her entire life is having this beautiful son in her life. And now she's learned what doesn't work for her in relationships. And now she's learned to actually connect to who she actually is at her core. And so what's really beautiful is these relationships taught her what it's sounding like is like, oh, I manifested these relationships and they weren't for me. Am I even being me in these relationships? Maybe not. Maybe let me connect in for 2 years to really see who am I? And that's when she connected in and really manifested in her dream partner now in the most beautiful way. And it's all happening the way that it was supposed to happen. And all of this is leading you to a deeper level of understanding you and what your next greatest adventure truly is. Does that feel right for you as well?
Oh, that is right on. And it's one of those moments where I think we don't like to do this, but with two failed relationships, I had to do that where it was like,
Yeah.
okay, I know we want to put the blame on everybody else, but where am I not showing up? And I realized just that I wasn't being me. I felt like I couldn't be me, right? And I knew that the man I have now, I always say I manifest him because I used to write out literally what I wanted in our relationship. And one of them was I could show up as me. I can show up as loud. I can show up, being the Reiki master I am with my crystals, right?
Yes.
Talking on a podcast. Like,
Yeah.
listen, a lot of times people don't get it. Or they're not ready yet, right? Whatever it
Yeah.
may be. So when you are fully aligned with who you are, that's when you call in that significant other. That's when you get the ideal clients, right? That's when you get those speaking events because you don't have to wear a mask anymore. You don't have to ask yourself, how do I need to show up today? You just show up. You just bring your energy that you have. And that has been the biggest pivot for me. It's just allowing myself to be the loud Reiki healing podcaster that loves to throw events and stand on stage and dance. Like, that's me. So, one thing for your listeners, like, really, when you find out like who you want to be, a lot of times that's your inner knowing exactly who you're meant to be, right? A lot of times people
Mm.
say, well, I don't know who I am. And I just want to take a moment and be like, well, who do you want to be? Because that image, that feeling, whatever it may be, it's your intuition telling you. And when you start to allow yourself to be her and really do this thing, whatever it may be, that's when the rest of the opportunities, the gifts, the gratitude comes on in.
Absolutely. So beautifully said. And just yes, yes to all of this. So I'm curious, what would you say to other mothers who are also entrepreneurs that want to do both? Because I think there's like sometimes this stigma around like I have too much going on here or here. And both, I believe, are some of our greatest portals for learning and expanding, and they can be, these spaces for us to really like, oh wow, like this can be so frustrating and so beautiful at the same time. Like for me, I've learned the most about myself through both of these, through owning my own business, which is my baby, and through having a baby, so being a mother. But I've grown so much. So what advice would you give to someone who's a mother that maybe wants to start her own business too? Or maybe she's in corporate, but she wants to do her own thing. Like, is there anything that you would share with her that could really support her now if that is where she's at currently?
Yeah, I would say design it your way. I think
Mm,
there's so many tools out there for like time blocking and morning routines and this and that. But for me, especially I was a single mom, right? There was no 3 hour morning routine that I could
yeah.
do.
Yeah.
Now it's a little different. He's older, right?
Yeah.
Very lucky he sleeps in and I have a significant other.
Mm,
But really figuring out like what does it look like for you? And it could be where you're doing the nap time hustle, right? You
mm,
got like 2 hours a day work on your business, and that's where you're at. and you grow according to the time you have during that stage. Because as you know, as a mama, they do grow fast.
Mm.
And you also want to make money and you want to do for yourself and make an impact, right? Especially us moms, we want to help others, right? That is something that makes us feel really good. So I always say design it for what works for you. I know there's so much noise out there of how to do it, how much you should be making, but how cool is it that you can build your business your way? Because that's why you're going into entrepreneurship, still make an impact for where you're at. And the more that you fall in love too with your business, you're going to start to be able to put the time in, right? The
Mm.
time's in and create the business of your dreams. And for me personally, my son has also been a part of the business. So my clients know that sometimes when he gets off the bus, he's gonna be poking his head in here, right? Like it's just also too, I draw in those clients because I'm allowing them to do it their way. So that's one thing I would say for the mama who's like, I really want to do this because I know that feeling, right? Christina, you know the exact feeling I'm talking about here.
Oh yeah.
And we got to also make sure that we're able to do it all. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, us women we're pretty powerful. There's a lot of stuff we can do. And how
Mm-hmm.
cool is it that you can start a business your way and let it grow whatever feels aligned for you?
That's some of the most powerful advice that I feel like we've had in this space. Like, do it your way. It's so simple and it's so true because if we're trying to copy and paste someone else's business strategy who doesn't have kids, or let's say who has other things that aren't exactly the way that we could do it in our life, like, we're not meant to copy and paste other people's versions of life. We're meant to do it our way in every way, whether you're a mother or whether you want to create a business or whether you just want to be the most soul aligned version of you, you're meant to do it your way. And so I feel like the core message underneath all of this is like, get to know yourself and start to live life in alignment with you. And suddenly things start to manifest that you could not have even dreamed of in the most incredible ways.
Yeah. And one little thing that I do a lot if I'm at a crossroad, right? So, like, if I'm trying to make a decision or need advice, and, you know, a lot of times I do therapy, and a lot of times they'll be like, well, what do you think? And a lot of times that's hard for us, especially mamas. But one thing that I do is, what would you tell your daughter?
Mm,
Right? Because really, that's you telling your younger self, right? Like, what would you tell her?
yes.
And that's a great thing to go back to when it comes to going after your dreams. You wouldn't tell your daughter not to,
Oh my God. Yes.
right? I mean,
Yes.
I have my son say affirmations all the time. Like he knows
Yes.
the drill, right? So ask yourself, like, what would you tell your daughter? And make sure that when you are making decisions and having the mom guilt and all this, make sure you're talking nicely to yourself as well.
Yes. 100%. I think that one of like a really interesting, powerful exercise that I do with my clients too, when they're in that thought loop of just talking shit to themselves, is I have them write down a letter to themselves, like just unfiltered, write all the shit that you are saying to yourself on a piece of paper. And then once you're done, I want you to write at the top of the paper, dear, and that person that you love most, your child, your partner. And then I want you to read it out loud and hear how fucked up it is.
Yes.
And people get body chills. They're like, I would never say this to my daughter. This is so mean. Oh my gosh, I can't believe how. And it's not to shame anyone, but it's just to notice the inner dialogue matters. It's taking away our life force energy when we could use that to create, exactly as Darcey was saying earlier. It matters where our energy is being placed. And so this allows you to really take a moment to pause and say, like, is this something I would say to my inner child or I would say to my daughter? And the answer is almost always no if it's not nice, right? And
Yeah.
so it's that idea of like just being aware and actually making a conscious shift in the way that we speak to ourselves by connecting that and saying like how do you want to build up your daughter so that she's truly living in alignment with herself? Would you say those things to her? No, you would invite her to follow the things that light her up.
Yeah, I had to do that exercise a couple months ago at a event.
Yeah.
But so she had us write down all the things we don't like about ourselves, all the negative things we say to ourselves every day. And then she goes, okay, now find someone in the room that you don't know. Okay. And then you're going to look her in the eyes and you're going
Oh,
to
God.
read your list. I was bawling and I was just like, I am so sorry to even say, I know it's
Yeah.
about me, but I'm so sorry to even say these words looking
Yes.
at you in the eyes. And
Yeah.
it was one of those moments like, whoa, we are being way too mean to ourselves. And we would never say that to somebody else.
Whoa, body chills on that one. That is a powerful exercise to get us to realize that that inner dialogue is real, right? And it's either building us up or it's tearing us down. And sometimes we don't notice it until we can actually take it out of our head and take a look at it in a tangible way.
Yeah.
Woo. Well, okay. So tell me, what do you do today, knowing that you really teach women how to connect to their worth being visible? What do you do that allows you to really continue to connect to your own worth? Make sure that you're getting first you're being visible to yourself, and then you're shining your light outwardly. Is there like a tangible exercise or something that someone else could do right now to really start to connect with how worthy they are and how worthy they are of being seen? Is there something you could share into the space that you think could be supportive for them to just connect into, maybe do like a quick exercise?
Yeah. So this is very basic, but something I've been doing the last month that has been a total game changer. Every night before you go to sleep, write down 25 things that you're grateful for. And I know
Mm.
we hear this a lot, right? Write a gratitude list, but 25 things is a lot. And then the next thing you know, you're writing, and you're like, I like my coffee. I like
Mhm.
that I was able to buy a backdrop, whatever it may be. And you start to go through, and then you also start to give yourself a pat on the back because what stuff comes out, like I was thankful I was able to pick up my son, whatever it might be. So that's just like a little tangible action that I've been doing. And I've been noticing a huge difference because I think so many times we beat ourselves up for not being farther along. Right. And then another thing too is I've been adding in a walk during the day. So what that looks like is in between a meeting, scheduling a walk with nothing, with no podcast, no music, just being with you. Because whether that walk is 10 minutes or 20, that might be the only 20 minutes that you have with yourself with no distraction. And that has allowed me to also, like, as an entrepreneur, come up with a lot of content and be myself and not be so focused on either my phone or if I'm in mom mode or whatever it may be. So allowing 20 minutes of like uninterrupted while movement, I think has really been great.
That's it's so beautiful how the simplest things make the biggest difference.
And those
I
are free.
Yeah, and is that yeah, exactly. They're free. You can do this with like you don't even you can use it on your phone if you needed to write things down if you didn't have paper, but you probably do, right? Just taking a minute to just connect into what am I grateful for? Because sometimes when I started this exercise, I would be like, ugh, and then I'd start it, and then you start flowing, and then you're like, whoa, like I'm really looking for. It's kind of changing my day now. Wow, there was a lot of stuff that happened today that was really amazing, and it's like you do the surface stuff first, and then you get deeper, and you're like, today was actually amazing. And then you start really looking forward to creating that list again. And then it has you actually look for it throughout the day. And for
Mm-hmm.
me, knowing I'm doing that gratitude list later, I actually create things to be grateful for. I'm like, I am so excited that I'm so grateful I was brave today and asked for that thing that scared the crap out of me, or whatever it might be. Or I'm so grateful that because it's almost like writing it in your head. I want to be grateful for this, that I was brave, courageous, or did something that scared me, but I really wanted to do it. And it has you like do things that will actually alter your day so you can write about it later. At least that's what I do too.
Yes, I totally agree.
Yeah. Amazing. Well, Darcey, this has been absolutely incredible. I know that the people listening here are gonna want to connect with you. So where are you hanging out? How can people connect with you? Share with us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so you can find me the most on Instagram under darceyelizabeth.co. You can honestly type in claim your network anywhere, and our website, our Instagram will show up. And then I have the Claim Your Worth podcast. So that is more of the mindset piece of this and really helping women find that worthiness so that they can be visible, showing up in their lives. And that is called Claim Your Worth.
Absolutely incredible, you guys. Thank you so much for tuning in to me and Darcey today. If you loved this episode, please take a screenshot, share with us your favorite takeaways, tag both of us. We love to see what resonates with you so we can create more and more of what it is that you desire. So thank you again so much for tuning in, and we will talk to you soon.
Bye.